Okay, let's move on to our pumpkin ricotta pancakes. So we're gonna start with 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of dark brown sugar, 1 tablespoon granulated sugar, 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, and 1½ teaspoons of baking soda. 3/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, some cloves, and a little bit of ginger. Those are the pumpkin spices, right? The cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and ginger. Okay, now for the wet ingredients, we're gonna take a couple of eggs, 1½ cups of buttermilk, 3/4 cups of ricotta, and 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree. The thing I like about the ricotta and the pumpkin is it's actually gonna lighten up the pancakes. So we're gonna put 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree in here. All right, let's just make sure we whisk this up well. So we're just gonna fold the wet into the dry. And like with most batters, I like to let it rest. I just find that when I let batters rest, I get a better result. So we're gonna make a spiced caramel to go on top of the pumpkin ricotta pancakes. And by spiced, I'm really talking about pumpkin-like spices. So we're gonna start with some heavy cream. And then we're gonna throw in a couple cinnamon sticks, 6 cloves, whole cloves, some star anise, and then some fresh ginger. We don't have to take the skin off because we're gonna strain this out anyway, but the ginger is actually gonna give it a really nice kind of spice. I'm also gonna put a splash of apple juice in here as well, about 1/2 cup. The apple juice will give it a nice sort of fruitiness, a little bit of sweetness. We're gonna let this come to a simmer, cut it down, and let it sit so that all these spices steep into the cream. All right, so let's make some caramel. We're gonna start with 1½ cups of sugar, a 1/2 cup of water, and then a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. The apple cider vinegar is a really nice sort of contrast to the sweetness. You're gonna get lots of sweetness from the sugar and creating a caramel. And also, you'll see that caramel crystallizes a lot. You can hear that sizzle immediately. You want them to have a little bit of a crust, a little golden brown on the outside. All right, remember our spiced cream? Cinnamon and some star anise, the fresh ginger. So we're just gonna pour this right into our caramel. It's gonna bubble up a little bit. It's okay, be careful. Beautiful. Just gonna stir this about. And now we have a spiced caramel sauce. Do not put your finger in there. As much as you'd like to taste it, do not do it. It cannot be hotter. I've made that mistake, believe me. So I'm just constantly whisking it to make sure that the caramel and the cream all becomes incorporated. That looks really beautiful. All right, we're just gonna let that sit. Let's check on our pancakes. The spices in the pumpkin, because they're brown, warm spices, they'll actually promote a little bit of golden brown. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little bit of the apple brandy, just a splash, into the caramel. And we're just gonna let the caramel just cool, just a tiny bit. We're just gonna give it a little more apple flavor. I love the aroma of pumpkin, especially those spices. In pancakes, they're amazing. During the holidays, I have to have something with pumpkin. And so pancakes is a really good way, especially for brunch, to kind of get that going. So we're just gonna take some of our caramel. So beautiful. And apples and caramel, pumpkin, and all those spices just go so well together. Creme fraiche is like cultured sour cream, and so it's gonna have a little tartness to it. So we're just gonna put a little bit of the creme fraiche right on top. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of cinnamon, just finish it off just like that. Never have enough cinnamon, never. The ricotta really lightens them up, but you have this flavor of all those spices. You have a little bit of that pumpkin in there. We're gonna make a hot toddy now. It's actually an apple hot toddy. A hot toddy is usually some kind of whiskey. What I'm gonna do is take some of the apple cider, some brown sugar, a little bit of nutmeg. This is what nutmeg actually looks like, you know, before it's ground. A lot of people don't know what it looks like. Let's put some vanilla in there as well. Just gonna cut this in half and then split the bean. And then with the dull side of the knife, just get the seeds out. Got the vanilla in there and maybe a little bit of orange peel. Let's get some whipped cream going. I have the bowl in the refrigerator. You can actually put it in the freezer if you want before you start whipping the cream. It just makes the process go a little bit quicker. A little bit of confectioner sugar. I'm gonna ladle some of this out. Daddy's gonna have a little bourbon. Just a splash. This one's for Sophie. She likes a lot of whipped cream. And this one is for me. Maybe a little more nutmeg just ground on top. There we go. Some gingerbread Dutch baby pancakes with some poached pears. We're gonna start off by poaching our pears. I'm gonna create sort of a poaching liquid that we're gonna actually turn into a sauce or a syrup at the end. So let's start with some water. And we're gonna flavor the water with about a cup of sugar and then a handful of cinnamon sticks, which we'll then take out because these aren't actually edible, but you know, it will flavor it with the cinnamon. And then I'm gonna take one vanilla bean. And the way that you actually use vanilla beans is you just take a very sharp, the tip of a small knife, and just go straight down the vanilla bean and open it up, because all the beans are actually right in there. And then I take not the sharp end of the knife, but the dull end of the knife, the top of it, and just kind of force the beans out, and then just drop them right into the water. And then take the bean and put that in there as well. And then when it actually starts to simmer, the beans will actually sort of distribute on their own. Okay, and then I'm also gonna take an orange peel, just a piece of the orange peel, and drop it in there as well. Okay, and then I'm gonna peel the pears first. You know, the skin on the pears can be a little tough. So I think it's a good idea to peel them. All right, so I'm gonna cut this in half. I'm gonna take a melon baller, just take out the core, drop that in. The thing I like about pears is that, you know, they can really take on a lot of flavor. Eating a raw pear is fine, but I always find that sometimes they're a little bit bland. And, you know, it's nice to cook them and bring some flavor to them, just like we're doing today. So we're gonna let my pears simmer for about 20 minutes until they're soft. Now I'm gonna make a little bit of a sauce to garnish the Dutch baby pancakes. So I'm gonna start with some creme fraiche, which is you know, it's a soured cream. It's a little bit tart. It's very, very silky. And then some vanilla extract. And then a vanilla bean. In this case, we're not going to actually put the bean in there, but just the seeds. And then a little bit of orange zest. So we're just gonna stir this up. The vanilla, the orange, and the vanilla. There's two kinds of vanilla. Vanilla extract, vanilla bean. Nice. And, you know, with the sweetness of the pears and also the pancakes, it's nice to have a little bit of tart, sort of citrus flavor kind of working against it. All right, now we're going to make the batter. So basically what we want to do is we want to make these really nice and light. And the very first thing we're going to do is actually whip some air into these eggs. So we're going to let them go for a little while. Okay. So then we're going to add some flour, 1/3 of a cup. Just a splash of molasses. A tablespoon of brown sugar. 1½ teaspoons of some pumpkin spice. Cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice. That gingerbread flavor. 1½ teaspoons. And then 1/3 of a cup of milk. pinch of salt. All right, then we're just gonna blend this just till we combine it. So then, I'm gonna take a hot cast iron pan, and it's very important that it's hot because as soon as the batter hits the pan, we want it to get a little crusty on the bottom, and then it creates the rise. We set our oven to 400 degrees preheated. We're gonna let it cook for about 15 to 20 minutes until we think it's done. Make sure you butter the walls of the pan as well. And the batter goes right in. And you see it's starting to cook. This is actually the way I cook cornbread as well. Get that nice crust on the bottom. Okay, 400 degrees. 15 to 20 minutes. Oh yeah, check this out. Gingerbread Dutch baby pancakes. Smells so good. Love that gingerbread. And you see how nice and light that is? And it's nice and custardy on the inside. Okay, so I'm gonna take the pears out of their poaching liquid because they're nice and soft now, and then I'm gonna let the syrup, the flavored syrup, continue to cook and reduce down and get that syrupy consistency. But I'm gonna take all the sort of inedible ingredients that are sort of flavoring this, this beautiful syrup out first. So it's the cinnamon sticks, the beans from the vanilla, and then of course the orange peel. And I'm gonna put this back on the heat, and I'm gonna add just a little bit of maple syrup to it. And then I'm gonna take my pears and just slice them up a little bit. I think just like in wedges. And these are gonna go on top of the Dutch baby. Great flavor. That's what I was saying, the pears are really a great canvas for lots of flavors. All right, so we're gonna let those cook for another minute or so they get that nice syrupy maple glaze on them. Now, I'm gonna take my Dutch baby pancake. Should be cool enough now and should come right out. Yeah, it's beautiful, look at that. And I'm gonna slather this with a little bit of that creme fraiche that we made earlier, creme fraiche, vanilla, and orange. And then some of our pears, a little bit of that syrup, a little confectioner sugar. I mean, look how beautiful that is. That's a pancake. I love the spices from the gingerbread. Those autumnal spices with a little bit of molasses really makes it a gingerbread flavored pancake. Lots of good winter holiday-like flavors. I'm gonna make a pumpkin chocolate swirl bread. I love those two flavors together. With recipes like this, where there's lots of ingredients and they have to be exact, I always come with my recipe because you really need to be, you know, spot on in terms of measurements. All right, so I'm gonna start with my wet ingredients first. 1.5 cups of sugar. And actually you're saying sugar is a dry ingredient. Actually, it's a wet ingredient, especially because when it melts, it turns to liquid. 1/2 cup of vegetable oil. I'm gonna start this in our mixer and just sort of beat some air into it so it's nice and smooth. All right, then I'm gonna add 2 eggs here. So 1 egg at a time. And then we're gonna add 1 cup of canned pumpkin. The canned pumpkin is the way to go. It's always consistent. We have some vanilla, and we're just gonna whip this just until it's incorporated. 1 3/4 cups of flour. All right, 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Make sure it's level. 1 teaspoon of pumpkin spice. So that's a combination of all those spices. I like to put a little extra in. I like that flavor. And then 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And then a little salt. Just whisk this up. And then we're gonna incorporate the dry ingredients just until they're well mixed into the wet ingredients. And then we're gonna take some semi-sweet chocolate that's just melted. So I'm gonna drizzle this in. Make sure you get all that out of there. And basically I'm just gonna like swirl it or marble it into the pumpkin batter. There you go. So then I have my cake pan, just brushed on the inside with some butter. And we're gonna preheat our oven to 350 degrees. And this is gonna bake for about an hour. Look how beautiful that looks. 350 degrees for about an hour. So then I'm gonna make a very quick flavored butter. We're gonna use some orange marmalade and some orange zest as well to flavor our butter. All right, so you just wanna make sure that this is well combined. I'm actually gonna leave this out so that it's nice and soft at room temperature. All right, the moment I've been waiting for. We are going to break into this pumpkin chocolate quick bread. It smells amazing. I love all those pumpkin spices. Chocolate goes so nicely with it. First of all, look how beautiful it is. You see the swirls with the chocolate and the pumpkin, and I'm just gonna spread some of that marmalade butter right on top. This stuff is good. And then if it gets like a little bit stale, you can always put it in the toaster and bring it back to life. All right, give it a taste. Orange, chocolate, and pumpkin, perfect combination. Let's get going on to our pumpkin latte. I'm making a brown sugar simple syrup. So it's white sugar, brown sugar, and some water, kind of equal parts. And then I always use the canned pumpkin. You know, pumpkin is squash, so this is just basically poached squash. It's cooked, it's always consistent, and actually it's a very good product. One of the things that I always say about pumpkin doesn't really have a lot of flavor. It's the spices that we think of as the pumpkin flavor. That's why they call things pumpkin spice. You see pumpkin spice everything these days. I did a TV segment once. I asked people what pumpkin tastes like. Just like kind of man on the street kind of thing. Like, I mean, I'll ask you, what does pumpkin taste like? You're gonna tell me it tastes like cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger and all those pumpkin spices. But pumpkin itself has very little flavor. So you really need to pump up the flavor of pumpkin with those spices and things that are sweet like maple syrup and honey. And pumpkin is sort of like, it's almost like a vehicle for flavor. I'm gonna start by using about 1/3 of a cup of our pumpkin in here. We're gonna take our pumpkin spice. This is a combination of ingredients like cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, maybe a little bit of allspice. If you wanna make your own pumpkin spice, you know, be my guest, but you know, now there's so many good quality spice blends like pumpkin spice, so you might as well just use it. So we're gonna put a little bit of that spice in there. So we're just gonna let the moisture from the pumpkin heat up a little bit and actually open up the oils of all those spices in there, just to kind of bring out the flavors. Now, I don't know about you, but I like to eat pumpkin during the season of pumpkin. You know, as soon as the summer's over, you start seeing the pumpkins grow on the side of the road, and then you'll start seeing like the pumpkin spice lattes in your local coffee shop. There's pumpkin in basically every single thing. If you're making it, somebody's doing a pumpkin version of it somewhere. So we're just gonna kind of stir this, and we're not gonna bring it to a boil. We don't want it to get cloudy. We're just gonna let the brown sugar simple syrup, the pumpkin, and the pumpkin spices just kind of hang out together, and then we'll strain it out. So for the pumpkin spice latte, I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla extract, and I'm gonna strain this out. I wanna strain out basically the pumpkin. If you don't have cheesecloth, which I'm using here, a really fine strainer will work just as well. And then you just wanna, like, very gently push it through. So basically, you're just getting pumpkin spice syrup. So this will keep for a very long time because there's lots of sugar that will preserve it. And you can use this syrup over ice cream. I think it will work really well. You can put it in your, of course, your coffee or your tea. And you can also use this on the, like yogurt or even like the parfaits that we're gonna be making later. With the granola, with the yogurt, a little bit more of the syrup. We're gonna put this in the refrigerator and let it cool. I'll be honest, I love making espresso like this. I mean, it's kind of cool. You don't need some expensive espresso machine. Put some water in the bottom. And then we're gonna just pack in the espresso. My feeling is if you're gonna drink coffee, you wanna taste it. You wanna feel it. Screw the top on, and just put it on the fire. And I need to froth some milk. So all we do for this, we're gonna scald the milk, and then these 3 ingredients, pumpkin spice syrup, the espresso, and the frothy milk, that's gonna make our latte. Latte time. We're gonna pour some of our scalded milk into our frother. Pump some air into it, gets it nice and light and frothy, which is exactly what you want. So we're gonna start by putting a little bit of the pumpkin syrup in the bottom, some of our espresso. And now some frothy milk. Looks good. Look at that, pumpkin spice latte. You know what the key to this is? You want it to taste like latte or espresso with just a hint of the pumpkin spice running through it, that's all. You don't want it to be overbearing. You just want it to smell like Thanksgiving, and that's the key, and that's what this does. We're gonna start our caramel, 1.5 cups of honey. So this is clover honey. I would say clover honey is probably the most popular honey that you'd find. I'm gonna take 1/2 cup of cream. We're just gonna combine it, the cream and the honey, and then put on the heat and let this get to 240 degrees. And then when that happens, we're gonna add a little bit of butter and some bourbon, a little bit of vanilla, and then we're gonna add some salt. And the salt is gonna give it that salted honey caramel flavor that's so popular these days. And it's gonna go terrifically with our pistachio and chocolate chip pancakes. Speaking of which, let's make some pancakes. We're gonna start with 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. 2 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. A little bit of salt. And that is the dry ingredients. And then we're gonna combine the wet ingredients. So we have a couple of eggs. One and a half cups of buttermilk. Some vanilla extract. 2 tablespoons of honey. 3 tablespoons of butter. It's melted, so it will incorporate into the wet ingredients. Then some orange zest. And then we're gonna chop up some pistachios and some semi-sweet chocolate. Pistachios are definitely one of my favorite nuts, and I love all things pistachio. I love pistachio cakes, I love pistachio gelato, pistachio ice cream, pistachio milkshakes. Now, when you're working with pistachio nuts, they're really dense, they're very firm. I think it's a good idea to kind of chop them up into smaller pieces, especially for, something like pancakes. Okay, that's the pistachios. And then we have some semi-sweet chocolate that we're gonna just chop up. And if you want to, you could use, semi-sweet chocolate chips as well. But we're gonna chop up our own chocolate. So we have shards of chocolate running through the pancakes. Not too bitter, not too sweet. They call it semi-sweet. Okay. I'm gonna put the wet into the dry, just until it forms a batter, and then we'll fold in the pistachios and the chocolate chips, or the chocolate shards. Smell that orange zest. When the pancakes hit the griddle or the pan, you're gonna smell the orange immediately. All right, chocolate and pistachios. So I think these are a little bit thick. I'm just gonna add a splash of buttermilk. I love buttermilk because it has like a little tang to it, but also promotes a tender pancake. Okay. Check on our caramel. Now at 240 degrees, we're gonna add a little bit of vanilla, a tablespoon of bourbon, a couple of tablespoons of butter, and some salt. After it gets to 240, then you can just add the ingredients and kind of swirl it around, and we'll have our caramel. That looks great. So good. Red velvet hot chocolate. So we're gonna start with a couple of cups of milk, and we're gonna scald the milk, and when the milk gets hot, then we're gonna add some of the cocoa powder and some semi-sweet chocolate to that. We're gonna make it red by adding a little bit of red dye. So while that's going, we're gonna make our marshmallow whipped cream. Put about a cup of heavy cream into our mixer, and then some cream cheese, some softened cream cheese. and a splash of vanilla extract. Then I'm gonna take our marshmallow topping and I'm just gonna fold it into the whipped cream. I kind of like this marshmallow topping stuff. You know, it's like, as a kid, I would, eat peanut butter sandwiches with it. I like to actually kind of fold it into whipped cream so it's not as marshmallow intense. This way you have sort of the marshmallow rolling through the whipped cream. What is red velvet hot chocolate? The hot chocolate is red, the marshmallow whipped cream is white. You know, it's the red and white goes, perfectly for the holidays. The very first red velvet cake did not have red dye in it. The way they got the red velvet idea was chocolate or cocoa powder mixed together with a little bit of vinegar, and then it created this sort of red brick color to the cake. And that's how red velvet cake came to pass. Now, of course, most people put some sort of red dye in there so they can really send home the idea that it's a red cake. But we're not making red velvet cake. We're making red velvet hot chocolate. Okay, so we're gonna take 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. I love cocoa powder. Making hot chocolate like this reminds me of when I used to make it with my mom when I was a kid, where we used to get marshmallows and just kind of put the marshmallows on top. And as a kid, like, you didn't really want the hot chocolate, you just wanted the marshmallows because they were melting. Now, sometimes what I do is I put like a semi-sweet chocolate in there. This is gonna make it incredibly rich and flavorful and not too sweet. All right, so here's the base of our hot chocolate, and I think it's important to give it a taste. Wow, is that intense? And not too sweet, too. That's why it's important to use the semi-sweet chocolate. You want to taste the hot chocolate in the pot before you actually start putting it together in the cups with the whipped cream and all that, because you want to make sure that it tastes right. Because if it needs a little sugar, or you want to thin it out, or make it thicker, you can do that now. I mean, this chocolate is so thick, it's almost like chocolate pudding. It's crazy. But I like my hot chocolate nice and rich. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of vanilla extract, which is, I always find kind of weird. It's like, add vanilla to your chocolate, but it just brings out that chocolate flavor. And then we're gonna make it red by adding a little bit of red dye, about a tablespoon of red dye. Oh yeah, there it is. What we've all been waiting for. The red velvet hot chocolate. Okay, you ready? Watch this. See, it's got that deep red color. I mean, you want it to be this brick red. You don't want it to be fluorescent red. We did a red velvet cake throwdown in Brooklyn, which I think we actually somehow won against Cake Man Raven. This is the whipped cream with the marshmallow in it. And there you go. I've been waiting all day to try this. I mean, it's incredibly rich. It tastes like chocolate, and that's, to me, is the key. And it's not very sweet. It's sort of a semi-sweet, exactly what the chocolate is. So it's got a little bit of sugar, a little bit of sweetness, but you can really taste the flavor of the chocolate itself. It's beautiful. Now we're gonna move on to some pancakes that are gonna be inspired by your favorite cinnamon bun. So now I'm gonna start by making the cinnamon sugar swirl. We started with some brown butter, and I'm gonna add about a half a cup of dark brown sugar. And then a couple of teaspoons of cinnamon. Whisk this together. This is what we're gonna actually pipe into our pancakes when we put them in the pan. I'm gonna add about a quarter cup of water. It's gonna get a little thick, a little syrupy, and the cinnamon is cooking. It smells great here. I wanna keep stirring it because I don't want the cinnamon to clump up, or the sugar. And a couple of tablespoons of cream. And you really have to let this cool to use it. Smells good though. Okay, so we have a little bit of warm maple syrup. I'm gonna pour it right over some softened cream cheese. This is gonna create our cream cheese glaze or frosting, basically what you get on top of a cinnamon bun. And this you wanna whisk pretty vigorously so it gets nice and smooth. Okay, let's make some pancakes. Let's start with 1½ cups of all-purpose flour. You know, I always have my recipes written down for batters and doughs, but you don't have to write them down, because all you need to do is go to foodnetwork.com/brunch, and the recipes are right there for you. 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and a half a teaspoon of baking soda, 3 tablespoons of sugar, a good pinch of salt. Mix these together, and then we're gonna get to our wet ingredients. A couple of eggs. 1½ cups of buttermilk. You could use regular milk, but I love the flavor of buttermilk, and also I think buttermilk makes for a more tender pancake. A little bit of vanilla extract. 3 tablespoons of melted butter. The melted butter is gonna help make the pancakes a little golden brown on the outside. Now we're just going to fold the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients just until it forms a batter. Don't want to overmix them. Pancakes make me very happy. Such a good thing. Who doesn't like pancakes? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my brown sugar and cinnamon mixture and put it into a pastry bag so that when I put my pancakes into the pan, I can actually swirl it right into the middle of the pancake. So you can see it's kind of thickened up as it's cooled. Lots of delicious goodness in here. Cinnamon, brown butter, brown sugar, and a little cream. Okay. Let's start making some pancakes. I'm gonna get some butter going in my pan. So we're gonna put some pancake batter right into the pan. And I'm gonna spread a little bit. Those cook for a second. I'm gonna take our cinnamon and brown sugar swirl and just swirl it right into the middle. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let the pancakes cook on one side, get them nice and crusty, and then we'll flip them over really quickly on the swirl side down, just to kind of cook the top of it. But for the most part, you're gonna cook them on one side, say like 80% on one side, flip them over for another 20% of the time, and then we'll be done. I slowed down the heat a little bit so that they actually cook through without getting too brown on the bottom side. At the same time, we don't want it to get too crusty here. Here we go, ready? Count to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They're beautiful. It's almost like you kind of slice the pancake in half and you reveal the cinnamon right there.